and I am starting a podcast today about knitting and all things fiber. I was inspired to do this by two podcasts that I've recently become familiar with. One of them is Diary of a Yarn Snob, and the other is The Grocery Girls Knit. Diary of a Yarn Snob came to me because I participated in my first ever fiber share exchange. And I happen to be privileged enough to have Julie, who is the Diary of a Yarn Snob podcaster, be my fiber fairy. And so she inspired me. I then started looking at other podcasts that she favorited and recommended, fell in love with Jody and Tracy, the Grocery Girls, and thought, you know what, maybe it's time I try something like this. A couple years ago, my husband had bought me a blog, a link, so I could create my own blog. And unfortunately, I haven't been very good about updating it. If you go to my Ravelry page, it's linked there, but the last time I updated it, I think was over a year ago. So I'm thinking that my talking and being able to present tangible objects and engage with the audience this way might be a more appropriate venue, and I certainly can then also upload the videos to the blog. So new to this, trying it out. I appreciate your patience. I might be just talking to myself in my craft room every time I do one of these, but maybe I'll have somebody follow me too. That's the one thing I love about knitting and the fiber community is that it's just one big happy family of really, really talented people. So a little bit about myself, Miss Knitsy. Where did that come from? That's my Instagram handle. It's also my name here on YouTube. It's my initials, and it was just something sort of clever and simple to come up with. I do love to knit, and I also happen to live by the sea. I live in New Bedford, Massachusetts with my husband and our pug, Watson. I'm not originally from Massachusetts, however, but I am very happy to have found this little corner of the world. I adore the community that we live in, and it's just a really good fit for me. So my family's actually originally from New York, Niagara Falls and Buffalo specifically, and I still have family that's there, one of which is my aunt, and she happens to be a fiber artist. She is phenomenal. She dyes her own yarn, she spins, she sews. She's actually working on my cousin's wedding dress right now. So I've always sort of had inspiration in my family, and my mother is incredibly talented as well. So it really kind of originates from Western New York, if you will. I grew up in New Hampshire. My family decided to relocate not long after I was born. I was about 3 when we moved. I went to school, or college rather, in Central New York, grad school in Boston, spent 2 years in North Carolina, decided to come back to the Northeast, and I settled here on the South Coast. Met my husband, who at the time was in law school. Never imagined that would happen. Our paths crossed, and sort of the rest is history. So if you don't know much about Massachusetts, we're very liberal. Which can have certainly its benefits and its drawbacks, depending on your perspectives. But what I love about Massachusetts, and in particularly the region of New Bedford or the South Coast, is just the strong communities that we have. It's a really, the cities are fairly big, but you feel like you're in a small town. And for me, that's really critical because New Bedford itself is undergoing a renaissance. It did have a very strong fishing, and actually it still does have a very strong fishing industry. We are, I believe, I wrote my notes here, #1 fishing port in the U.S. for 12 straight years. But it also has a strong textile history as well. If you go to our sister city, Fall River, there were a lot of mills there. Many of them are now being revitalized into apartments or businesses, but a very strong sort of textile history and basis. So it sort of just naturally dovetails with my interests, and I'm very fortunate to have my mom just around the corner as well. So she and I get together, go to a lot of the local fiber festivals, and just kind of engage in the community in that way. And we also are a very strong arts community. Lots of different talent is abundant in this region. So outside of my day-to-day responsibilities, I work in higher education. This is sort of my other passion, the other half to my identity. So enough about me and where I'm from. How did I get to kind of into knitting, and where did that start from? Oh, one thing I wanted to mention before I forget. Along with the textile history, New Bedford is known for Herman Melville's Moby Dick. So to kind of give you a historical perspective and context, there's, again, really rich history. But anyways, back to how I started knitting. When I was a little girl, My mom always inspired creativity. I remember as a young child her sewing machine being on our dining room table. I'd be watching The Cosby Show and she'd be sewing away. She quilted. She used to make my clothes, her clothes. She's just one of those people that can see something and give it an entirely new purpose. But I used to watch her knit. And I remember she had the Susan Bates needles at the time. And every time she would knit, it would drive me nuts as a kid because the needles would clack, click, clack, click, clack. But then I kind of got interested in it. I was like, well, what is all that clicking and clacking about and how is she making that? So for one Christmas, she purchased for me this book, Sunny's Mittens. And I apologize, I think it's going to show up in reverse on your screen. That's something I have to figure out how to fix, but bear with me for the first shot here. She bought me this book, and it actually is full of knitting patterns, as you can see, but it's actually a story about a young girl and her grandmother. I loved this story. I looked at the mittens and thought, oh no, As a young child, I was very much one of those crafty types, creative types, again, grew up with it. But if I couldn't perfect it on the first try, I wasn't interested. I was my own worst critic, still am to this day. But I was like, you know what? It's not for me. I did take up sewing for a little bit, but I was also a bit of a nerd. So school really consumed a lot of my time, and that was sort of where I found my creative outlet. So anyways, the mitten book, it was an adorable book. I read it, loved it, but it never really went beyond sort of the scholarly approach to it. Then I got to college, and I was home on break, winter break, and being in central New York, I went to Hamilton College, which is right between Utica and Syracuse. And you always hear about Buffalo and Niagara Falls getting a lot of snow. Let me tell you, Syracuse region, yeah, a lot of snow. There are times where we contemplated whether or not our graduation was actually going to be inside or outside because of snow in May. So home on winter break, my mom was knitting, and she was adorable. She found a local yarn store called the Elegant U in Concord, New Hampshire, and I think it was Concord. It might be Plastow, but in that region of New Hampshire. And she found some adorable patterns, and she just started knitting. And my mom goes in phases. She sews, she knits, she bakes, she paper crafts, and then the cycle begins all over again. And she made a matching hat and scarf for me to bring back to school, and then she made one for my roommate as well. And I, at that point in time, I wasn't embarrassed. I knew who I was. I had my own identity, and I thought, I'm going to wear this, and I'm going to wear this with pride, and nobody else is going to have this because it's not available in a box store. My roommate wore hers. We both still have them to this day. I think my mom actually took mine back. She stole it from me when I moved to North Carolina. How dare she? But I picked up needles and brought them back to school with me. And again, being the little nerdlet that I was, got into it, but didn't really dedicate myself to much more than knitting and purling. Come my second year of grad school, applying for jobs, wrapping up my projects, getting ready for my final presentation, and I was stressed out. And I happened to be in Michael's one day with my mom, and she said, why don't you pick up the knitting needle again? Oh, I should have worn a shawl pin. Sorry about that. And I thought, all right, I'm a little bit older, a little bit more mature. I'm used to, at this point in my life, trying things and not succeeding the first time. So, let's take a look. In Michael's, I found this adorable little kit called Ready, Set, Knit. And it was nice because it has a little built-in stand. And I flipped through it, and I said, Mom, I was like, I know how to knit, I know how to purl, and that's pretty much the extent of my experience. What do you think I could handle in this book? And as I look at the patterns now, I think, gosh, how was I so intimidated? These are pretty reasonable. But at the time, I was a beginner. So I fell in love with this pattern because, wouldn't you know, it's knit and purl. And thought, okay, I'm going to make myself a knitting bag. Nope, I even have my notes still there. So I started the bag, and I was hooked. All I used was simple cotton yarn that you could get in the chain craft store, but for a beginner, it was perfect. And I made this bag, okay? You can kind of see where my strong love of color comes from. I'm not afraid of color. I am not somebody that wears black all the time, and if I wear black, I've got a pop of color with it. So anyways, knit this for the first side, knit the second piece, or started the second piece. Graduated, left Boston, moved to North Carolina. It moved with me. I didn't finish it. I picked up a little bit of knitting while I was living in North Carolina, and predominantly it was for my pug. I knit her scarves. Full disclosure, my dog, she was fully outfitted. But it just, I sort of thought, okay, I can knit. I've got a skill, but I'm not by any means really into this. So then life happened, settled down here in the South Coast, got married. We're going to be married 5 years in June. And I unfortunately got really sick. And it was one of those moments where I remember calling my mom, and I was just overwhelmed, in tears, kind of freaking out, upset, just needed somebody to ground me. And my poor husband, we were still kind of newlyweds at the point, so he was sort of like, what do I do with her? I want to help her, but I don't really know what I should do. So anyways, I went to my mom. She's my rock. She's my best friend. And she said to me, go pick up your needles. Sort of like, duh, you fool, go knit. At the time, I was like, how is this going to do anything? Why is knitting going to make me feel better? Light bulb moment. It totally distracted me from everything that I was going through and gave me the opportunity to use my energy in a productive way. So I pulled out the bag, I finished it, and got ready to line it, make an I-cord handle, and you can see none of that happened. But this time, I didn't stop here. My mom and I discovered our local yarn store. It's Eva's Yarn Shop in Fairhaven, which is just over the bridge, literally over the bay, very accessible to us. And I had been to the yarn stores with my mother before, years ago as a young kid, and it was more of a torture because she would be there for hours. This time, though, I walked in, and it was like a candy shop, only way better. So, of course, I picked out a beautiful alpaca and gave it to my mom. I was like, Mom, go knit me a cowl with this. She ended up crocheting me one. I'll have to bring it on one of these episodes to show you. Beautiful, just beautiful alpaca, misty alpaca. It was one of their colorways. But I bought some yarn for myself, and I started exploring. And I just grew into something I loved and found my niche. At the same time, like I said, it kind of healed me, or at least distracted me. My health went on the mend, and from there, I've kind of been smitten with knitting. There's a strong fiber culture, certainly in my family. I'm going to show you a piece in a moment that's really special to me that is actually made by my aunt. But there's a strong fiber culture here in New England and in the Northeast as well. And it dates back certainly to colonial times. When you think about the establishment of this country and the colonies and figuring out how they were going to survive. The beauty of that, then, is that there are a number of fiber festivals that are located throughout New England and even into New York and New Jersey that are so accessible. I love traveling. And before I moved to North Carolina, I almost actually moved to Seattle, Washington. But the difference about the West Coast to the East Coast is the West Coast, it takes you days to literally get from state to state. In New England, you can get through all 6 states in one day if you're really dedicated to it. So everything's really accessible. And a lot of these events are hosted at old mills, factories, different sort of fiber venues. So it really just gives you the sense of feeling rooted in history, but also the progressiveness of the industry and the culture itself. Instagram is my weak spot. I'm constantly following people, reading their posts, and then, with the hashtags and being able to find people through their handles, it's just developed a whole world of connections for me. I had a Ravelry account. I opened it up when I started knitting, and I didn't do much with it. And I was really inspired by Julie, Diary of a Yarn Snob again, so thank you, Jules, to expand my page a bit. Join some groups, post some of my work, my FOs. I'm learning the language too. It's like, I always say to my husband, I may not speak another language. I understand Spanish, but I'm not strong in it or fluent by any means. But I speak knitting. I can understand the abbreviations and the patterns, but then there's this whole other level of vernacular that you have to get familiar with when you're talking with other people about the work that you do. There's WIPs, the works in progress, FOs, finished objects. Mind blown, again. Just love it, love it. So my Ravelry page has expanded a bit too. I'm still working on it. Definitely need to put some more of my work on there, and also get more engaged in conversations and whatnot. So it's really a juncture of building on something that's very close to my heart and from my family. And my hope is, with my talented aunt and my mom and myself, maybe we'll just knit and we'll post on Instagram and Ravelry, and that'll be the extent of it. But maybe it'll grow into something more. And I think that that's what I love too. We are definitely have a strong sense of ingenuity, and should have brought a thesaurus up here with me. We're creative types, and we're willing to take risks. So I'm hoping that perhaps that will turn into something in our future too. So now I want to jump to I'm going to call Katie's Closet. As I mentioned, live in New England. We do have winter here. We've found more recently that spring and fall have really condensed themselves. It's like a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month if we're lucky. But winter likes to extend itself, and summer likes to extend itself. Both have pros, both have cons. But the beautiful part of winter is there's always an excuse to wear something knit. And I have a lot of things that are knit. My coworkers know when spring is coming and summer because I stop wearing scarves. And they know that that means my closet is really suffering, because it's hard for me. It's hard for me to be able to pick something out of my closet that isn't handmade. Sorry, a little bit of a tangent there. But anyways, so my mom keeps me outfitted pretty much. She can knit for herself, and she does. But the woman, she's like Edward Knitting Hands. It's, she starts a project and it's done very quickly. So anyways, I wanted to share with you some pieces that I have from my closet. It's sort of going to be a little segment of my show, I think. And some of the pieces will be made by me. But the way my mom's knitting these days, most of them will probably actually be from her. And hopefully one of these days I'll actually get her on this little podcast too. So this shawl, which has been keeping me nice and toasty here. Oh, wouldn't you know, I would get it caught in my hair. Awkward moment. Okay, I apologize. So this shawl was made by my mom. She made it a little over a year ago. She and my aunt did the Downton Abbey knit-alongs with Jimmy Bean's Wool, which Jimmy Bean's Wool happens to be Diary of a Yarn Snob's local yarn store. I can't even describe the envy that I have. The biggest sort of large-scale local yarn store to where I'm located is Webb's, which really is like a 2.5-hour drive, not ridiculous, but to be like 15 to 20 minutes from Jimmy Bean's, that would cause some serious problems for me. So anyways, Mom knit this up using the Downton Abbey knit-along. I think it may have been the last season that the show aired. My mom had never knit lace before. And again, she's got a lot of gumption. She's like, okay, I'll just jump in head first and knit something with a ridiculously small needle and using mohair and a hand-painted yarn. Okay. Oh, and I'll throw beads into it too. This is what I grew up with. So, unfortunately, I don't know what yarn she used, what hand-painted it was. I do know that there's a mohair in here, and there's a little bit of a sparkle in the mohair. I don't know if you can really see it up close. But then she took it to the whole next level and did beads. Okay? Amazing. It is so soft. I know mohair can kind of be itchy sometimes. It's incredibly soft and incredibly warm, and I love it. And I love the fact that the whole time she's knitting it, she was picking out the colors, thinking that she was going to give it to me, and I had no idea. So it's one of those pieces that I really enjoy and I'll cherish. And today it's perfect. Here we are in the end of April, and it's only about 50 degrees out, which really kind of would be a heat wave in New England, except for the fact that it's cold and rainy. So it's kind of been keeping me warm while I'm up here in my craft room. The second piece I want to share with you from my closet is one that I do not wear regularly. As I mentioned, June is my 5th anniversary. It's been an amazing 5-year ride with my husband. And as I mentioned also earlier, my aunt is sewing my cousin's wedding dress. My cousin's getting married July 3rd. And this is, again, the kind of talent that this family has, and that my aunt has in particular. When I got married, my aunt asked what she could do or what she could make for my wedding. And I happened to get married again in June 23rd, so late June, which means it's actually gotten a bit warmer here in New England. And I thought, gosh, what could she make me? I didn't need a purse or anything of that nature. I had already picked out my dress. We had sort of a very lightly 1920s themed wedding. So I didn't wear a white dress. I wore sort of an antique white. The guys wore top hats and suits and whatnot. Anyways, so I said to my aunt, I said, the most special thing you could make me would be to knit me a shawl. Other reason being is she offered to make a headpiece, but I actually wore my grandmother's headpiece in my wedding. And my mom had actually worn it in her wedding as well. So I kind of already had the whole ensemble figured out, and I thought, what could I accent it with? And I thought, a shawl will be perfect. My aunt, oh my goodness. The sad thing is I didn't even get to wear this on my wedding because it was so hot, and there was a threat of thunderstorm, which fortunately came after the outside pictures. And in some ways I'm glad I didn't wear it because that means it didn't have a chance to get dirty or sweaty or anything like that. This is, if I recall correctly, silk and bamboo. Isn't this gorgeous? I wish you could feel it through the screen. It is so soft and just, it's amazing. I mean, I don't know if you can even appreciate it up close, but the beadwork that she did, the detail on this is just stunning. And I know that she took so much time and patience to make this, and it's just something I will cherish forever. I recently had it out, and I said to my mom, if my husband and I ever get around to having littles of ourselves, this is something I would want that to be able to pass along to them. And you can see this sort of leaf motif in the background there. Again, just so special. And so elegant, and one of those heirloom pieces that you'll treasure forever, or I'll treasure forever. So, that's my closet for this week. But get ready, I have plenty more that I can share. So, every podcast that I've watched definitely has a section on whips or FOs or newest acquisitions. I'm not going to go into acquisitions today. I'm eyeing my stash over there. I think I'll save that for another episode. But I do have some whips and FOs that I want to throw out there because they kind of tie into another segment that I'm going to add to my podcast. So, whips. Couple weeks, actually no, I'm lying. It was definitely a couple months ago at this point. Another local yarn store that we discovered called the Mermaid's Pearl, and it's in Wickford Village, part of Kingstown, Rhode Island, had an annual sale that they have, or a winter sale that they have. And I saw it on Instagram, and I said to my mom, it's been dreary, it's been cold, we're going. Sale or not, we just need to get out and do something. And we're very fortunate that my mom made friends with one of the women that lives up the street from her who also knits. And she's become such a part of my life, her and her husband. They've been so good to my husband and I that we refer to them as Uncle Don and Auntie Judy. So Auntie Judy, Mom, and I went to the Mermaid's Pearl. And for the longest time, I had been eyeing what's called Luxadorna, their little fun bundles. And of course, I don't have the bundle anymore because I've started the project. But it's just a beautiful display of how these little cashmere. Okay, what woman doesn't love cashmere? What knitter doesn't love cashmere? Heck with being a woman. What knitter doesn't love cashmere? But they're these little fun-sized bundle, and they come in DK weight or sport weight. So I happened to pick up one of the ones in the DK weight. There are a number of patterns that you can knit using the bundles. I mean, you can go off and do your own pattern. But Pepperberry Knits had what they call the Lucy Cowl. And it's pretty simple. I mean, it's just knitting in the round, so it creates that automatic stockinette stitch. But what I loved about this is it was going to challenge me to do something new, and that was to do a provisional cast on. I've done Kitchener, I've grafted, mattress stitch, etc., but I hadn't done a provisional cast on, and I was so intimidated by it because it was crocheting. Crochet! I knit with 2, not 1. I'm not a hooker. My mom can, and she keeps telling me I should learn, but I just haven't gotten there yet. So I thought, okay, this is going to force me out of my comfort zone. I'm going to try this. And wouldn't you know, I provisionally cast on. And I've started to knit my Lucy cowl. I love it. One, again, it's cashmere. But two, it's fun, it's simple. It's something that I can take on the road easily and not have to worry about losing stitch count or, yarn over, missing any critical piece to the pattern. So there are 7 colors. I'm on the 6th, which is this sort of speckled red. I'm not sure you can really see the fleck in it right now. But I have one more color to include, and that is this deep purple. Again, just kind of randomly picking up colors and going with it. I probably could have made them flow a bit as far as a gradient's concerned, but it's kind of my random knitting, which is also putting me outside my comfort zone a little bit. It's just my go along with it. So that's one work in progress. The second work in progress is a Find Your Fade shawl. So I had seen this all over Instagram. Plucky Knitter had it. A couple of local people that I follow had knit one, and I thought, Katie, you need to jump on board. Particularly because I have a pretty substantial stash. It's not huge by any means. I would not compare it to, say, the one you see sitting behind the grocery girls. I drool over that every time I watch their podcast. But it's growing. It's modestly growing. So it also gave me a chance to kind of dig in there, look at all the colors I have, and figure out what would blend with the next. And this is where we are to date. And I have to be honest, this also put me outside my comfort zone because I've never knit lace before. And fortunately, this is a very, very simple yarn over, double yarn over, nothing too complicated. Knit 2 together, slip, slip, knit, etc. But this is where I am so far. And I actually tweaked the pattern a little bit, which is not uncommon for me to do. I decided that when I started it on a size, I think it was a size 4. What size is this? Hold on one second. I apologize. Yes, when I started it on the size 4, some of the yarn I had chosen wasn't exactly fingering weight. Some of it was like a little bit of sport. So that just the stitches just didn't look right. They looked too constricted. So I thought, you know what, Katie, this is your shawl. This is your Find Your Fade. And it clearly says in the pattern, it's your Find Your Fade. Make it yours. So I decided, okay, I'm going to frog it, and I'm going to upgrade my needle size to size 5. And I'm glad I did. I also feel as though, or not feel as though, I kind of played around with it. In some cases, I did the double yarn over. In some cases, I just did the single yarn over. Kind of tweaking it as I went to sort of amend it to meet the need of the fabric. Again, this is bulkier. This is not fingering weight. This is more of a DK. Or it is a DK. But I'm really pleased with how it's turning out. Right now, I'm segmenting from color B to color C, and I just have to show you, this is color C. This is one of the yarns that my aunt has dyed. I wish I still had it in hank form so that you could see it. It's got, in that format, it's got this beautiful grassy green and a light yellow and pink, and it screams spring, it screams preppy, which kind of is me to some extent. It's just so soft. I'm, again, really fortunate that my aunt is that talented because she sends my mom and I boxes of her hand-dyed yarn. So let me just get the tag so I can tell you a little bit more about that yarn. And I apologize, I did fold this up and stuck it in the middle of the ball, so it got a little folded. But her line is Snowflake Yarns, and she does a lot of local shows in Western New York. So she has her yarn for sale, and then a lot of her knit up pieces as well. But that is her Indulge base, 80 merino, 20 silk, 10 nylon, so it really would be good for a pair of socks. But the color is Spring Fever, and it just makes me so excited about my garden and getting out there and seeing what comes up. So yeah, I love it. Color B, which is the one I'm transitioning out of, that one I'm going to talk about in a little bit because I have another little section that I'm going to do. So hang on tight for that. The first color that I started with, this is actually from Pearl Soho. They had a sale a couple of years ago. Actually, no, it was probably about a year ago. Online, again, Instagram. Instagram has seriously hurt my bank account. But on yarn, so really it hasn't harmed anything. This is their mulberry merino. It's an 80% extra fine merino with 20% mulberry silk. I can't remember the name of the colorway. I'll have to put it up on the screen afterwards. But really nice to knit with. Very soft, very smooth. I haven't purchased any other yarn from Paul Soho. It truly was the color that spoke to me and that it was on sale. So that's one of my other work in progress. I do have a pair of socks that's in progress, but I always have socks in progress, so maybe I'll introduce them the next time around. All right. Finished objects. Let me grab my latest FO. So I've knit since I've kind of caught in the knitting bug. I've done hats, scarves, cowls, cardigans, sweaters. I haven't done mittens or fingerless gloves yet, which is kind of odd considering where I live. So I think I'll have to venture into that very soon. But I saw this pattern on Instagram and I thought, I've never knit anything for littles, except for baby hats. And I love it. Look at this. Isn't this so stinking cute? It looks very bright red, and I think it's because of my overhead light. I apologize. It's overcast outside today, so I had to turn it on. But this is a Malabrigo. And now I'm blanking on all of the details of it. But it is in my Ravelry page. This pattern is called Vanilla Baby. And I just absolutely love it. It was very simple to knit up and was also in my stash. And it was the appropriate weight yarn for the pattern. And here's the pattern. It is a free download on Ravelry. So if you love knitting for littles or want to try it out, I strongly encourage this one. It was, again, a breeze to knit up, but just such a cute result. And I failed to mention earlier, this Lucy cowl, also a free pattern on Ravelry. So that is my finished object. There are plenty of littles coming into my life. I have a number of coworkers and friends that are expecting, so maybe they'll get it. Or honestly, I kind of just want to hang it on the wall because it's so stinking cute. But anyways, moving along, the next section, and this I think is probably going to be how I wrap up each of these podcasts, is what I'm going to call local love. I think you probably got the impression at the very beginning that I love where I live. And I love supporting local businesses. My husband and I both. Part of that is that my husband, when he graduated from law school and sat for the bar exam, decided that he wanted to serve the community where he had gone to school. And instead of trying to become part of a big firm, he was going to sort of put his own slate on the door and open his own practice. And it's challenging. It truly is, but I'm so proud of him. And what it's allowed us to do is really support our community because in exchange, his business is supported as well. So local love. Anyways, where's my local love from this week? Let me bring out this cutie patootie again. See these buttons here? They are bamboo buttons. They're 100% washable. And they're from Cat Wrinkles. Cat Wrinkles, Katie Westcott. She is out of Pawtucket, Rhode Island. She has an Etsy store, and she's at a number of local and even more regional fiber events. They're precious. She has stitch markers. She has pins, buttons, and they're not just round buttons with detail. There are buttons that you can actually embroider to detail them. You can purchase all kinds of different animals. She's got whales and hedgehogs, and she's just a fabulous person. I've gotten to know her through Instagram. I'm talking about her like she's my best friend. But I adore her work and just sort of her approach to her knitting and her profession as well. She also has these cool knitter's rules, and then she has some keychains or little fobs that you can put on, maybe to your knitting bag, your travel bag, with patterns on them, like how to do the Kitchener stitch, etc. Again, made out of bamboo. This is for swatching. I don't really swatch. But if I do, or need to, if I'm knitting something that really calls for it, I've got my knitter's rule. So I encourage you to check her out, whether you're local or check her out on Etsy. All right. Another local fave. I filled up a mug of seltzer water, thinking, oh, I'm going to need to refresh. And I somehow haven't had to yet, but I want to show it off now. Isn't this precious? This mug is made from the Rising Sun Earthworks. It's also available, the shop is available on Etsy, though I think she is on vacation right now. I think they're doing some renovations to their home based on the note she posted on Etsy. But it's another local business from Newport, Rhode Island. So South Coast Massachusetts and Rhode Island you're in Rhode Island, you're in Mass. You're in Rhode Island, you're in Mass. They're very closely connected. So I got this last spring. It was actually the end of May at Coggeshall Farm. They have a fiber festival. It's an old farm that's still working, but they have a fiber festival there. And Rising Sun Earthworks happened to have a booth. So my mom got a mug in the colors that match her house, because that's the kind of person my mom is. Everything is very coordinated. So when her coffee mug is out on the table, she wants it to blend in with the rest of the decor. Me, there was a stinking cute lamb, and it was pink, and I fell in love with it. However, I just need to point out, the mug did not arrive like this. The handle and the base were fully intact. My husband, he's kind of klutzy. And I love that he does dishes, but there was a casualty in the sink. Fortunately, we were able to repair it. Little Lammy is good to go again. And it really is one of my favorite mugs, because hot chocolate, coffee, tea, it's just wonderful for a nice big cup of that. And even for cold drinks. I know who drinks seltzer out of a mug, Katie? Well, I do. And partly it's so that I have the excuse that I can use something cute, because why would I drink out of a water glass when I could have a cute mug? So that's another Love Local. And lastly, so I mentioned the color bee in my Find Your Fade shawl was local. And it absolutely is. So there isn't too much left to this ball, but fortunately I still have, I apologize, I'm talking to my bag while I'm not looking at the screen. I'm going to get better at this, I promise. So this is what's left of the first hank that I bought. And I've got one more to go. I don't know if you can fully see just the color variation in this. This is from Northlight Fibers. This summer my husband and I went out to Block Island, which is part of Rhode Island, and Block Island is amazing. Highly recommend it. It's very relaxing, very calm, and it's just, everybody is your friend there. But Northlight Fibers is literally on Block Island, and they have a petting zoo. So we went to of course we had to go, because it's the local, yarn shop. But they do make everything here in the U.S. They do it, the majority of it, I believe, or all of it's on Block Island itself. But as part of their petting zoo, there are a variety of animals, but there's alpaca. And they just had their little cria, which are their babies. I learned that while I was there. So stinking cute, so amazingly soft. And just, again, another fabulous local business. This is their Water Street, which is a 40% cashmere, 60% superfine merino, 165 yards. So it, again, just beautiful to work with, and an amazing place to check out. What better, go to the local yarn store on an island, get yourself some yarn, hang out with some cria and alpaca, and from there, go grab a beverage and go sit on the beach. I mean, really, how much better can life get? So that is my other Love Local this week. All right, we're almost at 40 minutes, so I feel like I've talked a lot. I'm not sure how long my average podcast will be. I'll probably try to keep it under an hour. But I'm going to wrap it up now, because looking over my computer screen is my little pug Watson, and he's telling me that he needs some attention. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, it might just be me joining myself, talking to myself. I'm not sure. But I'm hopeful that I'll start to become even further embedded in the fiber community. And I look forward to talking to you all soon. All right? Thanks so much. Happy knitting!